So welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. Today, I'm joined by Michelle Wallace. You're very welcome to the Global Discussion, Michelle. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our international audience today. So Michelle, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me. I'm Michelle Wallace. I am the general do-everythinger in Host in Ireland. I don't even know what my title is. It's something around operations in Host in Ireland, and I'm also founder at A Better Work. So for me, I guess in my work, it's about, bringing people together, right, to do great things and to make an impact, to make a difference. So, for the work with Host in Ireland is very much around, like, how do we create this incredible community co-opetition, right? Because these people are competitors. They are, at one end of the scale, they're brands competing against each other. And on another scale, they're actually trying to do more for the industry, do more for their people, do more for the people engaged in it. So how do we bring all those together to do something better, like, something better for the environment, like DCs for bees, and trying to, halt the decline of bees in Ireland and beyond. Or do something for the talent, do something for the people coming into the industry and the people within the industry. And then from my work, which is very closely aligned in A Better Work, it's about basically how do we make work better? So, which is all feeds into our Host in Ireland stuff, but how can we, rethink everything that we think and know about work? How can we unlearn some of these habits that we've got into over our 150 years of working the way we work, to create a new way of working, to create a way of working that actually really fits in how we live today and how we operate and where we thrive and how we can perform and where we not find happiness but get fulfillment. We spend enough time in a work. It doesn't have to be that terrible. It should be something that we're enjoying. And so, yeah, I guess that's where I spend most of my working life, at least. And a little bit outside that, I'm a mother. I've got 3 kids. I have a teenager who is just slap bang in the teenager stage, like hilarious, real sporty, taller than me. Very scary when you're trying to tell your child off and you're looking up at them, giving out to them. And then I also have 2 littler ones, a 7 and 8-year-old. So 2 coming swiftly on each other's paths to try and overthrow me. And they all gang up on me regularly. So that's good practice as well for my work.
Well, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for giving us that quick tour. And I want to maybe just pick up on a couple of things there, because let's do a better work first, because we've been through a number of years where it's been upside down. People have got somewhat back to normal, or they're working remotely from home, or whatever they're doing these days. But I think what it did was it forced people to ask the question, is the way we're working the right way? And I think a lot of the times the answer that we came up with was no. So when you look at that from a better work sort of framework, what things are you actually focused on there?
There's so much. It's kind of like, it's something I think that people have been talking about for a long time, long before the pandemic, but the pandemic has just brought it into focus. And we now realize how important it is. Lots of other things going on in the world as well. The talent crisis, everything else has just made it more urgent, right? So kind of how we work, organizational culture. It's never been something where leaders go, it's broken, quick, everybody into the room. We have to sort this out now. It's always been, this product is broken. We're about to lose this client. Everybody stop what you're doing and sort this out now. I think this issue is becoming more and more urgent because we're seeing the direct correlation on the bottom line, on attrition, on costs, on customer experience, the impact of what we're doing and how we're working and employee experience is all impacting the organization in general. And it's very much about how organizations change, how they're change ready. Again, we've talked about this for years. but actually it's really just coming into focus. And I think it is trying to, I think the rut we might get into, or the assumption that we might get into, that, oh, here is the new way of working, here's how we should do things from this point forward, and this will be the right way. I don't think that exists. I think it's very much looking at the organization as a whole, you know, the individuals, and kind of going, right, what is the right fit for this organization? What's the right thing to do here? Because they're all different. They've developed differently. They've grown different habits. They've got, you know, different processes and systems and products and customer experiences. And so our first approach would be research. Like, let's really look deep. So we'd often have leaders saying, okay, we want to do, you know, we want to become a strengths based culture, something like that, whatever they come to us with it. And for us, it's like, okay, let's just, you know, yes, definitely we'll do that, but let's actually look a little bit deeper. Let's look under the hood a little bit, because often what leaders think is the situation on the front line, it's a very different situation. So it's trying to take a research-based, insights-based approach, really find out what's going on, and then look at, well, what's the ways of working for this organization? What's the organizational structure that you need? What are the systems and processes? And kind of build it up from there.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I suppose if we looked at it at a one-size-fits-all new way of working, we'd just be falling into the old traps and the old ways that we used to think. So that's a very valid point. And of course, every organization is different, and things like culture of an organization now, things around DEI and ESG and the corporate values, probably more important for attracting new talent now, and for, you know, doing the right thing than it's probably ever been. Does that come up a lot in the work that you do?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, look, I come from a communications marketing background. I've been the soldier who's approving the, you know, the CSR book that comes out every year. And honestly, it was such a box ticking exercise. There were, and now I've worked in incredible cultures, and I've worked in not so incredible cultures in the past, right? I never called it a culture, didn't know what it was, but there was just this feeling of, like, you know, genuine authenticity in an organization. And then there was a feeling of box ticking in some organizations, right? And that kind of, you know, filling out the CSR kind of checklist of, like, what could we say around this, and how could we make this sound good? That's just so transparent. You know, I think people see through it now. Customers see through it. Employees see through it. They want to have meaning. Like, we want to have meaning in our work. We want to have meaning in our lives. And I think there is a demand for more meaningful work, more purposeful work, more like, well, what are we really doing here anyway? Like, how are we going to get fulfillment? How am I going to learn in this environment? So there's far more you know, demand from employees who are willing, like, that's what we're seeing through the pandemic as well. You know, this idea of quiet quitting, this idea of, you know, the great resignation, whatever it is. I think people are demanding more, and they're actually okay to go off and start up something on their own, or, you know, go into the gig economy, like enter something that's far less financially secure potentially, because they're ready for more meaningful work. And we have to create that. We have to make that. And we can. That's the thing. Like, lots of work can be really meaningful, can be really fulfilling. We just have to kind of think through it a little bit better, create the right structures and systems, create the right learning environments. And, like, you know, let's blow our minds here. Maybe we even use people's brains. Imagine that. Like, you know, like, we come in and we extract the, you know, the experience and the intelligence that people have and they're willing to give. If we just kind of lose the command and control sense of, come in, I want you to do this and do it this way, and then be done with it. That way you're focused on, okay, I'll do this process, and once I've done this process, then I have done my job. No one's then focused on, well, what's the outcome, you know? And so this isn't about, like, I think sometimes this kind of work is seen as fluffy. This is about commercial viability. This is about how do we actually make companies work really, really well? How do we harness the brain power in this organization so that we can actually do better, so that employees are happier, so that leadership, is more effective. And so we get better results at the end of the day. So there's always there's a commercial reason. It's like saying, I love the saying, I heard it ages ago, that, to say your purpose in business is to make a profit is the same as saying your purpose in life is to breathe. It's obvious. That's what you've got to do. You've got to make a profit. Now, can you actually do more with that? Can you, really create meaning behind that, create purposeful work, and that impacts the profit anyway? So yeah, I think that's, I don't even know if I answered your question, Simon, but I've just gone on one.
You did answer my question for sure, Michelle. I think you've made some very important points there, because it's, extracting the other brain power. It also builds engagement, of course, and it gets people rallied behind what you're trying to achieve. And I do like what you said there, it's making a profit. Well, yeah, it's like breathing. You've got to do that if you want to stick around. But how you do that, and what tools and structures and frameworks you implement so people are engaged and they're making a real difference. And we saw that with you mentioned very quickly at the top, DCs for Bees, which was a real biodiversity project. And people listening around the world may not be familiar with that, but you basically did a lot of research in terms of how could you better help the bee population on the island of Ireland. And when you came back, it was actually about planting a particular mix of trees, fruit trees, that helped the bee population grow stronger. And then you went out and engaged with a wider community through Hosting Ireland, if I'm correct in saying that, for people to get involved, to help, plant these these correct trees to help the bee population, to help biodiversity. And that became a large project, right?
A huge project. This is one of the most outstanding things about, Hosting Ireland, is how this community of people, again, as I said, competitors who come together to do something incredible like this. This is the largest ever. Ireland has never had a full orchard. So one key part of DCs for Bees is this orchard project. It is phenomenal. We've never had a national orchard project in Ireland before, right? So to think that this kind of private industry and these companies just came together to do this, the largest ever project, orchard project in Ireland. There's there's 2,800 orchards. By the end of February this year, there'll be 2,800 orchards, mini orchards, planted in 32 counties around Ireland. And each of those orchards has 5 trees in them at least. And the thing is, like, we, in Hosting Ireland, we're a very small team. Gary Connolly is founder, so he's the big ideas, he's driving us further. It's always like, what's the big idea? What can we achieve? And that's where it came from. It came from this kind of like, Gary kind of saying, well, let's do something for the environment. And first it was these mad ideas. And then we thought, well, we actually haven't got a clue. Like we don't know. We're not ecologists, we're not biodiversity experts. So we go to the experts and we ask them, what's the most effective, impactful thing that we could do? And it was the National Biodiversity Data Centre in Waterford, a lady called Una Fitzgerald, who, God love her, like Una Fitzpatrick, sorry, how she even answered our call, right? Because, we kind of said, right, we're coming down, we want to know. Like we just want to pick your brains. And she welcomed us with open arms. She tolerated our crazy ideas. And she said, the most effective thing you can do is orchards. And by planting these orchards, she was kind of saying, if you could do 300 orchards, like that would be incredible. Gary said, no, 1,000. We need to do 1,000. And I was like, oh, here we go. Never, like, we'll never get this. maybe over 3 years, you know, we'll get it to 1,000 orchards. We're a kind of, I think we're 15 months from the first delivery of orchards to now, and it's 2,800 orchards. And this is like, because of this and because of how they're planted, because they're all the same species of trees, the same mix of trees, it's the first time in Ireland that we can track concurrent pollination. And that means we can track the health of pollinators in different areas of the country for the first time ever. And the thing, it's that old thing, you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so this is allowing for proper scientific measurement all over the country. It's not a, you know, the trees have to develop a little bit, but in 2 to 3 years, they'll be able to do that because of this little industry of a few competitors who came together trying to do the right thing and, you know, captured each other's imagination and invested in it, put their money where their mouth is, you know, created excitement in their employee base. And the other thing about this is, like, all of our partners are involved in this. So we've got 54 partners, all of our partners are involved. And when you look at, okay, they've all got these kind of local centers in Ireland, right? Some of them are indigenous Irish companies, some of them are very large global companies that have a local branch. But in the wider network, there's almost 1 million employees. So this project around DCs for Bees, and particularly around the orchards, has captured their imagination. So these local branches are saying to the global company, look at this case study. We were working with a local school and we were working with a local hospital to plant these orchards and, you know, engage with the community. And the global companies are going, God, that's amazing. And they're looking to do these projects now in the UK and Singapore and the US. So, you know, pardon the pun, but like, we want this to take wings. Like, you know, this isn't a problem that's localized in Ireland. It's a global issue that we all have to do something with. And if we can just capture everybody's imagination to make small incremental changes, imagine the difference that will make.
Yeah, I love it, Michelle, and I've been a big supporter of it, and I know people that have been engaged in it have been very enthused by it and very passionate about getting involved. But what impresses me the most is, from a big idea to on the ground research to, you know, a small group of partners coming together to engaging with that wider network, and as you say, from a small number of partners to 1 million people, and then all of a sudden it's a truly national project, which then gets picked up internationally, which people go, oh, hang on, maybe we could do this in other countries. And it's exactly what you described earlier, isn't it? It's that bringing that sort of purpose and that organizational culture really to life, which, when you think about it, a hosting industry, people that have data centers and look after the world's data in Ireland coming together, they don't have to do any of that.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I think, you know, I don't know about you, Simon, but I definitely have climate anxiety, right? I've got kids. I think about it too much. I'll actually get concerned, you know, really worried about it. And I think so many people are like that. And what happens is that feeling of almost hopelessness can kind of just shut you down and think, well, there's no point in doing anything. And I think what DCs for Bees does and what Host in Ireland does is it paints a picture of possibility. What if we can do this? What if I can do it? Because if I can do it, you can do it. And if you can do it, that person can do it. And if that person can do it, this 1 million people can do it. Like, we can do something bigger than the sum of our parts if we just create that vision, create the right possibility, try and do the very best thing we can do with the least unintended consequences, with hopefully some experts saying to us, no, try this one will really work. This is the best thing you can do. It's simple, it's easy, you know, working with various suppliers. Like, it's so funny doing a project like this, because, as I said, we're a small team. We're not a logistics company. We're not an ecology company. Like, starting on this just felt mental. Like, it felt like the most ridiculous thing we could possibly do. But our partners believed in us. They trusted in us, and we had to make it happen. And it was that kind of belief and possibility that we could make a difference that we found ways around, we're not ecology experts. We found ways that we're not logistical experts, that we could just work with the people who actually were, and to make it happen, and I just think that in the world that we're in today, we need to find that hope. We need to find that possibility. We need to find that vision to be able to, shake off that feeling that we're out of control and we can't do things. That's what burns people out, that we do have control, and where we can control it, maybe we can even make a bigger impact than we thought in the first place. And it's just getting those first few steps, just, going, okay, well, let's just find a supplier. Okay, if we find a supplier, then maybe we can do it. Oh, we found a supplier. Okay, well, let's find a logistics expert. Maybe if we find a logistics expert, maybe we can do it. And just going step by step until suddenly you've got 2,800 orchards all over Ireland, and the largest orchard project that the country's ever seen.
Yeah, it's incredible. Thanks for taking us on that journey, Michelle. I'm sure that's of interest to people listening. It's a great project for people to check into. I do want to ask you a couple of other questions, but before I move off the topic of hosting Ireland, I want to just ask you about the bringing together of what were, and still are to some degree, an industry of data center providers who were all competing with each other, if I'm honest, very aggressively in the international market space. Sorry. What was it like pulling that together? That must have been a real challenge.
Well, it's funny. This was before my time, right? But I was one of those soldiers. So I was part of, when digital realty originally launched in Europe, I was part of the team that effectively built out digital realty in Europe. And so, I was one of those aggressive competitors, right? And I do remember moving on then to another organization, Cult, at the time, and actually, separate to Host in Ireland, separate to Gary Connolly, bringing some competitors together to kind of have a coffee and to talk. And we were all very guarded and all, very, very, very secretive and kind of giving little bits away. And, it never really went anywhere. And a few years later, Gary set up Host in Ireland, and he literally took, 5 key competitors in the market and almost did it as a bet. He said, betcha I can't get all you guys into a room to work together on something and get you to pay me for it, right? and he did. And, those founding partners, who are all still involved or, influencing Host in Ireland today, are the case studies. They're the ones who say, actually, coming together to be able to work together for the greater good. Like if you look at Dublin now, and I'm not saying Host in Ireland is responsible for this at all, but like if you look at what the kind of center of excellence that the Dublin metro area is in terms of data centers, there's products and services in data center related products and services being exported all over the world because of this center of excellence that's been built up. And certainly some part of that is that these competitors were able to work together, that they were able to create this community. And, you see it now in if you go to Finland or Denmark or Holland or, Frankfurt or any of the key data center markets, you see that influence of that community, of that kind of, sharing community, where they will, share information kind of for the better of each other, because they know that they can create this kind of rising tide for each other. And it's an incredibly generous, format, but they did it again, like it's kind of creating that vision and people taking a bit of a leap of faith, because as you said, they're, very aggressive, competitors, but be able to come together and actually do something. And I think part of it is actually bringing the people of the industry out. So you'll notice with Host in Ireland, like we don't have pictures of servers and wires and buildings. We have pictures of people. In everything we do, it's always the picture of people. It's always picture of people together, building relationships. We create, I think what's unique about Host in Ireland is creating that deep, deep sense of connection and belonging. And that's what Gary did from the very, very start. we've just, since I came on board, it's just helping them to build that.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And I know certainly the demand for data hasn't slowed down. It is growing exponentially every second of every day.
Mhm.
And the requirement for hosting data continues to grow. It's a huge international industry. There's also a challenge there too, isn't there? Because, particularly with power today, particularly from a sustainability perspective. And do you find that answering some of those questions is better as a sort of collective than each individual company sort of trying to answer some of those questions on their own? Because everything from cooling to using sustainable energy to the future of the data hosting business and industry internationally, it is going through technology changes itself.
For sure. And there's such a multifaceted answer to that, to be honest with you. I think from a global perspective, every industry has to do better. It is an energy intense industry, and there are other energy intense industries and electricity intense industries, and we all have to find ways to do this better. Intrinsic, because data centers are a location where you have intense compute. Electricity is one of the key, or energy is one of the key expenses, right? One of the key costs. So it has always been a very efficient industry, and looking for ways to reduce that cost has been key, because that's part of their competitive advantage. So it's intrinsically efficient. However, because of the rate of growth of compute, obviously there's more and more data centers out there. That's better than individual computer rooms around the place that are inefficient, but it's difficult to kind of make that comparison. So that's one thing. But in terms of, I know in Ireland, like, we've got very specific, energy problems, but that is not unique to Ireland. That's happening all over Europe, all over the world. And I think as an industry, we need to do better. But I think as an industry, and our systems are the national power companies, the government, the policies, like, it all has to work together to create the right solution. And I think, like, trying to finger point and, this, you're wrong and you're wrong, it's not going to work. We all have to come together to find the right solutions here, because compute isn't going anywhere. And people kind of think, well, no, we don't need data centers, we've got the cloud. It's the same thing. Like, the cloud is the data center, and it's not going anywhere. We have to just work together to create the right environment of renewable power, supply, use, efficiency, so that we can create the world that we're all living in and we're all experiencing. And we're on social, we're gaming, we're on video, we're not driving to the office anymore, we're on Zoom instead. This goes through a data center. Like, we have to find solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And I know it's a challenging topic for lots of industries, and it's a global challenge, right? It's on the table of most countries around the world. It's a real challenge. And I do think back to what you're saying earlier, though, through that collaboration, through that coming together, through that solutions type approach, and getting people to work together that maybe haven't worked together in the past. I think we'll find a way forward. And do you think, my last question on this is, do you think, though, that there's still a huge misunderstanding or a huge gap in education? Because you mentioned that, you don't use pictures of servers and wires. And of course, why would you? You share the human connection and the collaboration, and that makes a lot of sense. But do you think that people just go, well, it's up in the cloud, it just works? Whereas there is a huge complexity behind the scenes to making this stuff work.
So, sorry, your question around that then is
Well,
it
my
lack of
question is simply
understanding?
this, do you think that it's too easy to lay blame when there's actually, it is crucial for the viable economic success of countries, individuals, nations across the world, that the data infrastructure is robust and secure and continues to grow? But most people don't see that. They just pick up a smartphone.
Yeah, and look, there's that, right? There is absolutely that. There's and why should you, like, you know, in this phone right here, and I don't even have an iPhone, I've only got a Samsung, like there's more compute in this phone than flew the first rocket to the moon, right? And we all have one, at least one in our pocket, right? It's phenomenal, the growth of compute, and it's so it comes so naturally. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm reading a book and I'm kind of, you know, expecting to see the time digitally appear on the top of the book, or these silly things that like just happens automatically with your Kindle or your devices. So it's coming so naturally to us. So I can understand why people don't think too hard about it. At the same time, it is our reality. And I think that the systems, the governments, the policies all have to, you know, create the right solution to bring that together. So yeah, the narrative is missing, but I think the biggest thing, the biggest mistake any of us can make, and you see this in polarized politics, and I'm not, you know, I don't know enough about all of this to even comment properly or get into politics for sure. But like these kind of polarized conversations don't help in finding solutions. Polarized conversations and blame just means that people stop talking and start to look at single issues in isolation, which will never bring the best solution for us. I think open conversation, you know, seeing different perspectives, being open-minded for you know, the possible solutions, and there are loads out there, which is great. We just need to see them moving faster, and being able, I think having better, more open conversations will help those to move faster at the rate that we really need them to happen at.
Yeah, no, I agree, Michelle. And it's like, I suppose, electric vehicles, to look at a different industry. That, you know, it's the great solution to the combustion engine, but you've got to make them, you've got to mine for the raw materials, you've got to ship them around the world, and then you've got to build infrastructure so you can charge them. And that's just not there. I was talking to somebody recently in Australia, and, you know, you've got to really plan if you're going on a long journey where you can stop off, you know, outside of the major cities, I should add. It's very similar in Ireland too. So I think every industry has its challenges, but thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. And look, you mentioned a book, and I want to change gear slightly before we run out of time. I like to ask people what they like to read. So do you read for pleasure, for business? Is reading for business your pleasure? Are you an audiobook person? Do you like the physical book, even though it doesn't have an electric digit in the top right-hand corner? What kind of things do you like to read, Michelle? How does that work for you?
So a little bit of all of the above, honestly. So what I try and do, because I love, so, you know, what I do, and I guess I've got really strong principles around like separating out work and life, because I could be a workaholic if you know, without much effort. So I have to be really kind of strong with my boundaries. And I do love, you know, workbooks. I love anything to do with business and culture and change and psychology and all of those things. So what I try and do is I try to listen to any of those kind of books roughly during working hours, or, you know, kind of slightly extended working hours, but never kind of going to bed at night or, you know, on the weekends. I try to kind of limit it to during the week. And then outside that, I do a lot of fiction. And it's funny, we were only saying this earlier on, because, you know, I do a lot of Audible. And because you know, again, busy life, 3 kids, I have a whole pile of books, work-related books over here in the corner, and they end up sitting there unopened, because what I do is I buy the Audible book, I read it, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could see this thing, you know, or I wish I could read back over this section or highlight it. So then I buy the Audible, then I go and buy the physical book. The physical book sits on the shelf, which I actually end up never opening. At least I have the comfort of knowing that it's there. So that's how I read business books. And then fiction, I love any type. Historical fiction, you know, I love thrillers, anything really. And I'll read it on Audible, Kindle. I usually have about 5 books going at the one time of various genres.
That's great. That's great. So there's a nice mix there. There's also a sort of a when you do and don't read certain genres or certain types, and you're what I would call an author's dream. You buy the audio and the physical book, so that's great.
Every
But there
book
is
costs
something
me an
about
absolute
owning
fortune.
the written book. Yeah, absolutely. But no, thanks for sharing that, Michelle. That's great bit of insight. Thanks for sharing. The other thing I want to ask you is about throughout your journey, whether it's back in the telecommunications era, whether it's doing what you do now, but there must be people along your journey that you admire, that have inspired you. And when I ask you that question, what springs to mind, or who springs to mind?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And there has been lots along the way. And I think, there's been kind of small learnings along the way, but they might seem small to people, but have been really pivotal in my life. And one guy that I used to work with, Martin Carroll, I remember I made this stupid mistake. I got something printed, and I kind of remember, I think it was like a print, typo or something like that. Like, I did something wrong, can't remember, and I was just mortified. It was really early in my career. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I did this. And I just thought, oh, after making this mistake, they're going to think I'm so dumb. I just really worried about it. And I said it to him, and I was really nervous saying it to him, and he looked at me and he was like, okay, what are we going to do? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, well, what should we do? And I was like, well, we could get it reprinted. He's like, okay, let's do that then. And I was like, what? Am I not fired? Like, and he's like, are you going to make the mistake again? I was like, no, never again. I've learned. And he's like, of course. Like, who doesn't make mistakes? And, for me, I would say that is the one thing, I believe, like, in learning. I believe in a learning culture, and it is literally impossible to learn if you don't fail. And I think that was just such a great little learning for me earlier on. It was like this little seed. It was this little thing, this little mistake. Let me tell you, I made like 100 times bigger mistakes since then. I like some, literally, I would love to tell you, but they curdle my stomach. They were that big mistakes. But that's how I learned, and that's how I've developed, and that's how I've grown, and that's how I've matured. And I still have so many more, and I'm going to make so many more mistakes, and that's okay. And it's that kind of learning culture. So those kind of, probably like early career little lessons that people taught me. Another guy, I remember, early in your career, you're kind of intimidated by these, clever, powerful people, and in charge leaders. You think, God, will I ever get there? And they're so much more superior to me. I could never match up. And he just sat me down. He said, they're human. Like, actually, some of them are not great. Like, and it's okay, we're just all the same. And that was a brilliant lesson for me, like, to never be afraid, or never to and not to say that I didn't. After that point, I was still very young. I still certainly was afraid and intimidated. But I also remembered that they were human the whole time. And so it always helped to build my confidence, and understand as well that people are human, they make mistakes. And no matter how inexperienced or young you are, to have an open conversation around that, not in an accusatory way or a blaming way, but in an open way, can be really helpful, even for that person who seems so much more experienced or powerful. Another perspective is always helpful. So yeah, some great lessons from some great
I think
managers.
that's great advice. And it's, what's the old one? Somebody who never made a mistake never made anything. And
Yeah, brilliant.
the other one, mistakes are the portals of discovery. I'm not sure if that was Joyce. Maybe I'm quoting it wrong, but I think, but it's not the mistake. It's suddenly the realization that it's okay and you can move forward from here. And that little confidence build.
Yeah.
It's so important in life. Yeah. Thank you.
So important. Yeah. And being able to just chat about those mistakes is incredibly powerful for a team.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask you, obviously, as you look forward now, whether it's the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, what are you thinking about? What's taking up your mental capacity? What are you planning? What are you hoping to achieve over the next year?
Yeah. So, for me, I think feel like this is going to be a big year. You know, we've got the pandemic. There's so much, you know, it seems like there's a lot of economic change in the climate. And, you know, for me, I guess I really want to double down on, you know, what I stand for, like, you know, ensuring that my work is purposeful, that I'm doing what I want to do. So there's a huge amount around like impact, you know, what's the difference that we as a team can make in the world, and that, you know, feeds through on how we work and how people work, and how you know, we can do more with the host in Ireland partners, how we can do more with that audience. What is the difference that we can make in the world? So you know, I want to, if we can touch and impact more and more people around, you know, feeling that they have the control and the power to make changes in their world for the better, then at the end of this year, I'll be very happy, you know. So that's what it's about for me. I want to be a difference maker who enables and makes other difference makers, because you know, I think for both the Work in a Better Work and Host in Ireland, it's about creating something bigger than we can do.
Yeah, I love that. That one went in, the difference maker. I'm keeping that one. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, look, before we wrap up, Michelle, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with our audience? And, or, you know, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and find out more about Host in Ireland or about the work that you do, where's the best place for people to find you online these days?
Yeah, sure. So there's one thing that I just want to add, and it was just about that last point. It's about, you know, if you have a domino can knock down a domino that is 1.5 times its size. Okay, so each domino can hit a domino that's 1.5 times its size. And imagine as that adds up, right? So it's not, forget the ripple effect, right? You could have a domino, and the domino in 244 iterations, right, is as big as the Empire State Building, right? So just like only 244 dominoes. If we talk about difference makers, imagine that, like you doing this podcast right now, somebody, you know, listens to you, listens to one of your guests, makes a change that, you know, impacts somebody maybe who has a louder voice, or a wider audience, who has a wider audience. And if you think about that and think about the possibility of change and the possibility of impact of those dominoes, yeah, just be the next domino. That would be what I'd like everyone to do. And to find out more, visit hostinireland.com, find out more about GCs for Bees and how to get involved and maybe be influenced to do something yourself on it. And then also betterwork.com as well, if you want to make changes in your work. And of course, follow on LinkedIn as well, on Michelle Wallace. LinkedIn. It's not that.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you, Michelle, for sharing all that with us today. That brings us nicely to the end of today's episode of the Global Discussion with Michelle Wallace. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening around the world. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, do all the normal things we need you to do to help support the podcast. And I hope that you'll meet me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Michelle. It's been a great pleasure to catch up with you again today.
Same, Simon. Thanks so much.